Miss Stout, please read the requirements carefully. Once you submit your personal profile and sign up, all of your information will be sealed. You must then enter the Research Institute within 15 working days. Until the research results are made public, you will not be allowed to leave. The response from the National Academy of Sciences Research Institute came quickly, accompanied by a form. Charmaine Stout stared at the screen, but the mouse in her hand suddenly felt as heavy as lead. The door to her room suddenly swung open, and Charmaine blinked, quickly closing the laptop without a trace of emotion. Charmaine, can you stop working for a while? Spend some time with me today. We haven't really been together in a while. Ezra Yarbrough placed a glass of milk on the bedside table, then sat down next to her. Normally reserved and distant, today he was like a golden retriever, affectionate and clingy, wrapping himself around her. His handsome face was soft with tenderness and affection. Charmaine, however, didn't melt into his arms as she usually did. She stiffened, her back rigid. Her gaze was fixed on Ezra's face, so strikingly handsome, his eyes flickering with desire, and her own reflection visible within them. The deep, lingering affection was clear. This was how Charmaine had viewed her relationship with Ezra until yesterday. Yesterday, when Ezra had accompanied her to see a psychologist, Charmaine had gone to get her medication, but then, suddenly curious about possible side effects, she had turned around to ask the doctor. It was then, by chance, that she discovered the secret hiding beneath Ezra's tender exterior. She heard him speak impatiently to the doctor, a side of him she had never expected. Doctor, the medication you gave last time didn't work. Charmaine woke up in the middle of the night and almost realized I wasn't home. Increase the dosage. Don't worry about the side effects. The words hit her like a thunderclap, shattering the illusion of a perfect, harmonious marriage she had long believed in. Once the lie cracked open, everything that seemed flawless fell apart, leaving only the absurdity of the deception. Charmaine, a professor at Judgeton University and a PhD advisor, had always been detail-oriented. Finding problems in the smallest things was her strength, so she began to investigate. The truth hit her hard, unexpectedly laid bare before her eyes. The other woman was one of her own students, the one she had asked Ezra to support financially due to her poor background. At some point, the two had become romantically involved, even going so far as for Ezra to drug Charmaine every night, ensuring she would fall asleep without knowing anything. That was the cause of her recent nightmares, the underlying truth behind her fragile nerves. Thinking back on it all, Charmaine's heart ached with a painful intensity that nearly shattered her sanity, almost breaking the mask of composure she held up now. Charmaine forced a smile at Ezra, the expression light and airy. All right. How about we go out today? Ezra's eyes flickered with a brief flash of guilt, but it was gone in an instant. He didn't answer and merely handed her the milk with a gentle tone. Sure. It's up to you. But drink this first. I've heated it to the perfect temperature, just the way you like it. Charmaine stared at the milk in front of her, tears threatening to spill from her eyes. Ezra, maybe another day. My stomach's not feeling well today. Ezra, busy with getting ready, didn't notice her distress. He gently patted her head. Come on. You're an adult. Stop making a fuss about not drinking your milk. Be good and drink it up. You said it's the best protein. Charmaine took a deep breath, then, in front of him, drank a large sip of the milk. Ezra visibly relaxed and stood up. I'm going to handle some company matters. You stay here and wait for me. But Charmaine knew exactly what was happening. He was waiting for the effects of the drug to take hold. Watching him leave the bedroom, Charmaine quickly filled out the form and, this time with no hesitation, clicked send. Half an hour later, Ezra returned to the room and saw Charmaine lying on the bed. Her breathing was steady, like she had fallen into a deep sleep. He let out a quiet sigh of relief. Before leaving, he made sure to tuck the blanket around her carefully and place a gentle kiss on her forehead. Then, without hesitation, he turned and left. The sound of the door opening and closing echoed in the silence of the night, jarring in the stillness. Once Ezra had gone, Charmaine slowly opened her eyes. The bright, clear gaze she was known for now seemed clouded with sorrow, and her face was ashen, devoid of life. With delicate movements, she propped herself up in bed. Her gaze drifted toward the door, her eyes distant and numb. She felt like a hollow shell. Before lying down, Charmaine had found a moment to sneak to the bathroom and make herself throw up. Even so, when she stood up, her limbs were still tingling, her strength drained. The effects of the drug were clearly powerful. A wave of bitter sadness swept over Charmaine, and despite herself, a small, bitter smile tugged at the corners of her lips. She had to admit she had been a fool. Before the drug took full effect, she had still clung to a small hope. She had hoped it was all a lie, that the husband who had loved her so deeply could never do such things. But reality struck like a slap in the face, shattering the illusion of a happy marriage. Charmaine paused for a moment to collect herself before she stood up, got dressed, and followed Ezra. Perhaps due to the rush, Charmaine wasn't the best at following him discreetly, but she managed to follow him to a bar without trouble. She remembered, in the past, how Ezra had quit smoking and drinking for her sake, knowing her aversion to those things. But now, Charmaine realized the truth. Ezra had only pretended to give them up in front of her. In the corners where she couldn't see, Ezra's desires had reignited, and with it, his heart had strayed from its rightful path. Charmaine watched Ezra enter a private room, and she deliberately waited 10 minutes before approaching the door. She peered through a small window in the door. The scene inside shattered her already prepared expectations. On the black leather couch, a man and a woman were passionately kissing, completely lost in the moment. They seemed oblivious to the passage of time and everything around them. The man was Ezra. And beneath him was Melanie. At that moment, Melanie gasped for breath, her face flushed and her eyes heavy with lust. She playfully pushed Ezra away before teasingly unbuttoning her blouse, her voice breathy. "Ezra, you're so eager every time. Am I the only one who can satisfy you?" Ezra gulped, his gaze locked on the exposed skin of Melanie's bosom as she continued to undress, his breath becoming ragged. His handsome face was filled with a hunger he had never shown Charmaine. "You little minx," he murmured as he pulled her closer and kissed her deeply. Charmaine, watching from the doorway, felt like a heavy weight had settled on her heart. The invisible pressure squeezed the air from her lungs, making it hard to breathe. Suddenly, a wave of disgust overtook her. She sank to the floor, clutching her mouth to stifle the nausea. 5 years of marriage, and every time they had been intimate, Ezra had been tender and considerate, always putting her feelings first without ever showing any passion. She had thought it was because he respected her and was uninterested in the physical side of their relationship. Now, she realized how foolish she had been. He had reserved his respect for her, but his desires had been given to another woman. Charmaine didn't want to be discovered at that moment, as it might lead to other problems. With trembling hands, she snapped a few pictures on her phone, then quickly left. She didn't even remember how she made it home, but as soon as she stepped through the door, pain unlike any she had ever felt gripped her abdomen. The agony was so intense that it felt as if her very soul was being torn from her body. Drenched in sweat, Charmaine mustered the strength to grab her phone, but she didn't dial Ezra's number. An ambulance arrived soon after. Barely conscious, Charmaine could only remember being wheeled into the operating room. The harsh light above her eyes was blinding. She heard someone sigh softly beside her. "The baby's only 2 months along. I'm afraid we won't be able to save it." When Charmaine woke up, she sat by the window, staring blankly. It felt like every tear she had left in her life had been shed at that moment. She couldn't even begin to describe how she felt. The good news was, she had been pregnant. The bad news was, she had lost the baby. For 5 years, Charmaine and Ezra had longed for a child. But those hopes were dashed every single time. After every disappointment, Ezra comforted Charmaine, telling her that maybe it just wasn't in the stars and that she shouldn't worry too much about it. Charmaine could see, though, that Ezra truly wanted a child. She had tried every folk remedy and supplement. She had even, a lifelong skeptic, turned to praying. No one had expected it, but she had managed to get pregnant. Charmaine softly caressed her flat stomach, a wave of heartache washing over her. Maybe it was better this way. The child would never have to grow up in a broken home. Just then, the nurse entered with some medication. Seeing Charmaine's pale and sorrowful face, she sighed in resignation. "What's the use in regretting it now? Just be more careful next time," she said matter-of-factly. When you try again, avoid taking any medication for your nerves, especially heavy sedatives. Even if the baby survived, there could have been deformities. Charmaine's head buzzed, and she felt a chill run down her spine. Did the medication cause my miscarriage? She asked, her voice shaking. The nurse glanced at her, her expression puzzled. Of course. Those meds have a heavy impact on adults, let alone a baby. Charmaine let out a soft laugh, which grew louder, though her face remained drenched in tears. She gripped the blanket tightly, her fingers turning white from the pressure. She wanted to scream, to let it all out, but she couldn't summon the strength. She just cried and laughed, as if losing her mind. The nurse gave her a strange look, finished with the medication, and hurried out. Charmaine collapsed onto the bed, her body limp and broken and her eyes full of despair. The last traces of love she had left for Ezra vanished. When Ezra arrived at the hospital, Charmaine had already composed herself. Aside from some slight redness and swelling around her eyes, there was no sign of anything being wrong in her appearance or behavior. Ezra rushed in, his handsome face filled with concern. He was clearly out of breath, sweat beading on his forehead. He stepped into the room, his worry overwhelming when he saw Charmaine's pale face. Charmaine, what happened? Why are you in the hospital? His voice was tinged with panic. He quickly added, I had to deal with something at work last night, so I rushed out. I didn't want to wake you or worry you, so I didn't tell you. Charmaine remained calm, carefully watching Ezra. His eyes were filled with worry and tenderness, but there was no hint of guilt. When she didn't respond, Ezra's unease deepened. His voice faltered as he asked, Charmaine, are you angry with me? She forced a weak smile, still slightly breathless. Of course not. She reached up and gently brushed Ezra's slightly messy hair. It's nothing. I just woke up with a fever and didn't feel well, so I came to the hospital. Look how worried you are. Ezra sighed in relief and pulled Charmaine into an affectionate embrace. Charmaine, you have no idea how scared I was when I heard you were in the hospital. What Ezra didn't see, however, was the emptiness in Charmaine's eyes as he held her. There was even a trace of disgust in her gaze. From where she stood, she could clearly see the marks of intimacy on Ezra's neck. Suddenly, a wave of nausea hit her, and she pushed Ezra away. The sudden movement almost made Ezra stumble to the floor. He wasn't angry, but there was a hint of sadness in his eyes. Charmaine, are you really mad at me? Charmaine fought to suppress the nauseous feeling rising in her stomach, the urge to vomit almost overwhelming. She shook her head, pretending to have a headache. I'm fine. The doctor said I have the flu, and it's contagious. Until I'm better, I should stay in the hospital so I don't give it to you. Ezra's frown deepened immediately at her words. Which doctor said that? No way, Charmaine. You have to come home with me. He crouched down, taking her hand with reverence and affection, like she was the most precious thing in the world. If you're not within my sight, I'll worry about you. So tender, so loving. He was trying once again to weave a web of sweetness, to deceive her without her noticing. Charmaine pushed his hand away, forcing a smile that felt weak. Ezra, don't do this. I'll come home when I'm better. Ezra saw the determination in her eyes and finally sighed. All right, fine. But the joy in his gaze was nearly impossible to hide. After all, within the next few days, his secret affair would be a lot easier to manage. Charmaine felt a wave of sadness. Such poor acting. How had she not seen through it before? Her hand, hidden behind her back, still clutched the miscarriage diagnosis, crumpled tightly in her fist. In the following days, Ezra continued to spend the majority of his time with Charmaine. Rain or shine, he came to the hospital every day, always attentive, always thoughtful. The nurses would often comment on how perfect he seemed. He's such a handsome guy, looking like a movie star, and he's so good to his wife. Right. He's so protective of her. The other day when I spoke to him, he was cold as ice, but he always mentioned his wife. Ugh, I wish I could meet a man like that. Charmaine overheard this while she was up, trying to walk around, and a bitter smirk appeared on her lips. Was he really being caring? Then why hadn't he even bothered to ask the doctor how she was doing? Why did he believe that a simple cold could make her suffer so much, causing her stomach to ache every day and her face to remain pale? His daily attention was just so he could clear his evenings to be with another woman. Charmaine almost felt exhausted for Ezra. She quietly stepped to the stairwell and sent the photos from that night, of Ezra and Melanie's affair, to the private detective. She also messaged her lawyer friend. Less than a week left. Please make sure the agreement is ready. As she turned around, Charmaine overheard a familiar voice from the hallway. Stop it. I have to be with her during the day, but I'll be with you at night, like always. Okay. Just 2 more hours. Once I give her this afternoon's medication, I'll come to you right away. Don't forget to wear the clothes I bought for you. I want to see them when I get back. Ezra stood by the window, the cold light streaming in, giving him an almost ethereal, statuesque appearance. No one would have ever guessed that this seemingly perfect man would speak such intimate words to another woman. The conversation continued, and Ezra's tone grew more tense and agitated. Melanie, don't even think about it. I told you, that's my home with Charmaine. You have no right to interfere. In the quiet hallway, even without the speaker on, their words could be heard clearly. Melanie seemed to have started crying, her voice soft and pleading, trying to coax Ezra. He remained silent, his jaw clenched and his teeth grinding. Ezra didn't notice Charmaine standing behind him, pale and still. Just then, a nurse passed by and called out. Miss Stout, you're still recovering. Don't stand in the draft, or you'll catch a cold again. The words hit Ezra like a thunderclap, jolting him awake. His face drained of color. He quickly ended the call, turning around to find himself locking eyes with Charmaine, whose gaze was as cold as ice. She had lost more weight in the past few days due to illness, her pale face expressionless, like the winter sun, bright but without warmth. Charmaine. Ezra's heart raced. He stepped forward, fumbling for words. He opened his mouth but had no idea what to say. Charmaine smiled lightly, as though nothing had happened. What's wrong, Ezra? I heard your voice and came to check on you. You look off. Did you argue with someone? Ezra visibly relaxed, quickly slipping into his usual act. He furrowed his brow, feigning irritation. A few companies I'm working with have been acting up. I got angry and gave them a piece of my mind. Anyway, we shouldn't be standing here. Let's head back. Look how cold your hands are, Ezra remarked, swiftly taking her hand and tucking it into the warmth of his coat. Through the thin fabric of his shirt, he tried to warm her hands with his body heat. Charmaine lifted her gaze to Ezra's flawless profile and, for a brief moment, lost herself in thought. Ezra, I want to go home. Ezra's smile faltered for a moment before he quickly recovered. Maybe later. He scrambled for an excuse. Didn't the doctors say you're still recovering? It'd be best to stay at the hospital for a few more days. Besides, our anniversary is coming up. Let me take some time to make the house look nice. Ezra lowered his voice, his tone deep and sultry. Charmaine, I want to surprise you. The air between them felt heavy with tension, but Charmaine's heart remained as cold as ever. She quietly withdrew her hand, giving a small nod. All right. Ezra, trying to sound considerate and a little eager to please, added, how about we go watch the sunset on Mount Ashmore for our anniversary? You've been wanting to go for months, and I finally have some free time. Charmaine's expression grew even more distant. She forced a strained smile. Forget it. I'm tied up with a group project. I can't get away. Ezra hesitated, his dark eyes briefly clouded with a rare trace of hurt. Charmaine, don't you remember? Your project is almost finished. The final tasks can be handled by my department. He paused, then asked, almost timidly, Charmaine, did I do something to upset you? Charmaine didn't answer. She just looked at him coolly, a chill spreading inside her. If he hadn't mentioned it, she might have forgotten. As a mentor, Charmaine had been overseeing a project with several students. The school hadn't supported it at first, but Ezra had kept pouring money into it. In fact, to ease some of Charmaine's stress, he'd even set up a project department to collaborate directly with her team, allowing him to fund it without question. At the time, Charmaine had been touched by his gesture. It wasn't until she started investigating Ezra and Melanie's relationship that she had a rude awakening. The night that marked the beginning of their affair, the night of passion, was also the night Ezra had announced the creation of the project department. So, Ezra didn't establish that department just to help her. It was more about making it easier for him to have an affair with Melanie. All those sweet memories from the past, the ones that had once filled her heart with warmth, turned into slaps to her face, one after the other, as realization hit. Now, seeing Ezra's eager, affectionate expression, Charmaine only found it laughable. He was still pretending. A quiet, bitter laugh escaped her throat before she nodded. All right, let's go together. After all, she had her own gift to give Ezra on that day. After their conversation, Charmaine quickly made an excuse to rest and left the room with swift steps. Ezra watched her retreating figure, his mind replaying the strange look she had given him moments ago. A wave of unease washed over him, but he quickly pushed the feeling aside. Ezra was certain that Charmaine loved him deeply, that even that cold, aloof woman would get jealous. A few years ago, if he had even exchanged a few words with one of his assistants, Charmaine would sulk for days, ignoring him completely. If she had discovered what was going on between him and Melanie, she wouldn't be so cold. He was confident that, with her love for him, she would have reacted very differently. His phone buzzed again. It was another message from Melanie, begging him to take her to his house. Ezra's handsome face darkened, and just as he was about to lash out in anger, a new message from Melanie appeared on the screen. The message contained a provocative picture. On a white bedspread, she wore a sexy outfit with black stockings, posing suggestively. Melanie had a sweet, innocent face but a body that was intoxicating, like a poppy, addictive and dangerous. Ezra didn't send the scolding message he had been preparing. Instead, he swallowed hard before speaking in a low, husky voice as he recorded a reply. Melanie, I'll agree, but just this once. After this, you need to understand your place. You shouldn't interrupt my life with Charmaine. When Charmaine was discharged from the hospital, she realized with a shock that she only had a few days before she had to report to the research institute. Back at home, Ezra had done exactly what he had promised. He had decorated the house ahead of time. It was filled with all of her favorite things, plants, pink balloons, and cartoon characters. Instead of the cold and aloof version of him that everyone knew, Ezra was acting like a child, constantly asking her, Charmaine, do you like it? Is there anything you don't like? Just tell me and I'll fix it. For the first time in a while, Charmaine smiled. Ezra, thrilled by her reaction, immediately moved in to kiss her. Just as their lips were about to meet, Charmaine gently pushed him away. I need to freshen up first. She quickly made her way to the bathroom, the smile fading from her face. Her eyes became empty, tired. When she looked up, her gaze fell on something out of place on the countertop, a small bottle of cosmetics that wasn't hers. The sample had clearly been used quite a bit, meaning its owner had been staying here for a few days. That wasn't all. As Charmaine stood there, her senses sharpened. A sickly sweet perfume lingered in the air, and she realized with a jolt that it wasn't her scent. She didn't wear perfume. Charmaine stood there for what felt like forever, tears falling without warning. She had never imagined that her life would be in such shambles. Charmaine wasn't naive, she knew this was all Melanie's doing. It was a deliberate provocation, a declaration of possession. Charmaine quickly regained her composure and opened the bathroom door. Then she grabbed 2 bottles of red wine and went to find Ezra. Pretending like nothing was wrong, she smiled sweetly at him. Ezra, how about we have a drink tonight? Ezra didn't answer immediately, likely still deciding whether to meet with Melanie later. But Charmaine's unexpected gentleness softened his heart, and he agreed. A few glasses of wine later, Ezra, normally able to hold his liquor, had flushed cheeks. He clung to Charmaine, repeating over and over how much he loved her. Charmaine, calm and collected, pulled out the divorce papers from her bag. In a gentle tone, she coaxed him. Ezra, I love you too. Come on. Be a good boy and sign the papers. Ezra, like a puppet with no will of its own, complied. Once he had signed the divorce agreement, Charmaine stood up slowly, showing no mercy. With a gentle push, she sent the dazed Ezra tumbling to the floor. Charmaine smiled as tears blurred her vision. She retrieved the prepared gift box and began placing one item after another inside. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Each piece was neatly arranged before the box was packaged nicely. She gazed down at the unconscious Ezra on the floor, her eyes devoid of warmth. With a light voice, she spoke, "Ezra, don't blame me. I'm just returning the favor. You could drug me, why couldn't I do the same?" The next morning, Ezra woke up feeling an odd weakness throughout his body. However, as he lay there, everything seemed fine. Charmaine simply told him it was because he'd had too much to drink the night before. On the table beside him was a beautifully wrapped box. Ezra's curiosity piqued, but Charmaine, looking a little embarrassed, explained, "That's your anniversary gift. Don't open it yet. Wait until tonight when you get back." Ezra felt a warmth in his heart as he pulled her into his arms, a rare trace of guilt flashing in his eyes. He spoke softly, "Charmaine, after this week, I'll take you abroad for a month. We'll get away and clear our minds." Charmaine gave a brief nod before quickly pulling herself from his embrace. "Hurry up. We're going to be late." At the foot of the mountain, as they were getting out of the car, a high-pitched, sweet voice called out, "Miss Stout, Mr. Yarbrough, what a coincidence. You two are here too." They turned to see Melanie, surrounded by a group of students from the project Charmaine was leading, resting at the base of the mountain. Charmaine's expression immediately turned cold, but she didn't move, instead watching Ezra's face closely. As expected, the usually composed Ezra was clearly uncomfortable. His lips were pressed tight, his eyes flickering with unease. Ezra immediately grasped Charmaine's hand. "Charmaine, let's go up the mountain first." But Melanie was quicker. She dashed over and blocked their path, flashing a seemingly innocent smile, but her gaze never left Ezra. "Miss Stout, since we've run into each other, how about we all hike together? It's like team building, right? It's better to enjoy it with others than alone, don't you think?" Despite her words, Melanie was inching closer to Ezra. Everyone else was dressed in warm hiking gear, but Melanie was different. Her jacket was purposely unzipped to reveal the curve of her sports bra, and her thin yoga pants clung to her long, toned legs, her body undeniably attractive in a way that would catch any man's eye. Ezra hesitated for a moment, his eyes momentarily shifting. Charmaine watched her, thinking back to when she had first met Melanie 3 years ago. At the time, Melanie had been struggling with financial issues, unable to afford the cost of continuing her master's program. One of the professors had offered to sponsor her. But Charmaine soon learned that this professor was far from innocent, he was a predator, exploiting many of his students. Most of those victimized by him had to keep silent, fearing his power. Those who spoke out faced harsh consequences, they might not graduate or, worse, suffer a ruined reputation. Charmaine had felt sorry for Melanie, unwilling to let the young Melanie be ruined by a despicable man. She had taken a risk of angering the professor to help her, funding her education and even bringing her into her project team. She had thought it was a genuine act of kindness. But now, it seemed she'd only raised a snake in the grass. Charmaine didn't blame Melanie, she knew well that Ezra's nature meant their marriage would have problems even without Melanie's interference. She only blamed herself for not seeing it sooner. Noticing the coldness in Charmaine's gaze, Melanie recoiled slightly. She then edged behind Ezra, speaking in an exaggerated, pitiful tone, "Miss Stout, why are you glaring at me? Is it really such a big deal for us to hike together? Do you really dislike me that much?" Ezra, clearly irritated, moved aside, pulling Charmaine closer to him. He wrapped his arm around her shoulders, his face dark as he scolded, "What's up with your tone? Don't you have any manners?" Around them, some students chimed in teasingly. "Miss Stout and Mr. Yarbrough are so perfect together. It's too much to handle. I envy Miss Stout for having such a great husband. Did you see how Mr. Yarbrough immediately stepped away when Melanie got close? He has such a strong sense of boundaries." Charmaine listened to the chatter, almost letting out a bitter laugh. If she hadn't witnessed the passionate, tangled scene between Melanie and Ezra with her own eyes, she might have been fooled by their charade today. Melanie pouted and muttered under her breath, "I guess we're being the third wheel today." Her words were light, but Charmaine could sense the underlying truth in them. She had clearly seen the flash of jealousy and disdain in Melanie's eyes just moments before. Melanie turned to her with a playful wink. Miss Stout, it's just a hike. You don't mind, right? There's a group of us here, she said, signaling her friends to chime in. Yeah, come on, Miss Stout. Let us join you. One of them said. We promise not to disturb you and Mr. Yarbrough. We'll just be hiking together. You're the nicest person in the world, Miss Stout. Ezra barely suppressed a scoff. They were piling on the compliments, making it impossible for her to say no. It was clear to Charmaine why Melanie had shown up today. There was no such thing as coincidence, not when she was involved. Even Ezra, who usually kept his cool, spoke up in a tone that sounded almost too considerate. Since we've run into each other, let's just go together. They're your students, after all. It wouldn't be right to ignore them. I'll cover everything, and I promise they won't be a bother. Charmaine felt a sharp pang in her heart, but her face remained calm. She smiled lightly, her eyes carrying a depth of meaning. All right, then. Out of sight from the others, her fingers curled into a tight fist, the pressure causing her fingertips to turn white. The group made their way up the mountain, chatting and laughing along the way. Charmaine, however, kept her attention fixed on Melanie and Ezra. All throughout the hike, Melanie did everything she could to get closer to Ezra. Every time she did, Ezra put on an act of annoyance, his lips tight as though he might snap at any moment. He was avoiding her like the plague. Charmaine couldn't help but find his efforts laughable. His feigned irritation didn't fool her. When they finally sat down to rest, Melanie slid over to Charmaine, the sickly sweet scent of her perfume invading the air. It was the same perfume Charmaine had noticed in her bathroom at home. Miss Stout, Melanie cooed, I've been using this new skincare product lately. It works wonders, and I thought you might want to try it. After all, you're almost 30, right? Better start an anti-aging regime before it's too late. The sarcasm in her voice was unmistakable. Charmaine's heart tightened with a pang of hurt. She glanced up to see that Melanie was holding the very sample of skincare she had found in her bathroom. The smug, satisfied smile on Melanie's face was all too clear. Charmaine didn't let her get her way. With a cold, indifferent tone, she replied, Is that something to be proud of? But Melanie wasn't deterred. She leaned in closer, lowering her voice. Actually, I saw you peeking at the bar that night. The words hit Charmaine like a slap in the face. The walls she had so carefully built around her vulnerability began to crack, exposing the raw wounds she had kept buried for so long. Her breath caught in her throat, and her eyes began to sting with tears she refused to shed. Melanie continued, enjoying every moment of Charmaine's discomfort. The truth is, Ezra and I have been together for a while now. He loves me. He can't get enough of me, always wanting to be with me every night. You know what he told me? He said you're like a corpse in bed. It's only with me that he can feel alive, feel passion. And while you were in the hospital, I was making love to him in your bed every day. Ezra was the one who took me back there. I'm sure you'll be surprised to learn that he created the Department for Yarbrough International's partnership with our group just for me. The team knows. They even call me Mrs. Yarbrough behind your back. She leaned in closer, her voice dripping with malicious glee. So, tell me, Charmaine, what are you even holding on to? If I were you, with everyone lying to me and turning their backs on me, I wouldn't have the courage to go on. But here you are, more shameless than I anticipated. I suggest you leave before you embarrass yourself any further. The more Melanie spoke, the more venomous her gaze became. She had an innocent, beautiful face and a sweet, melodious voice. But the words that came out of her mouth were like sharp daggers, stabbing into Charmaine's heart. Melanie grinned as she watched Charmaine's face grow paler, expecting to see her explode in anger. But to her surprise, Charmaine simply took a deep breath. Suddenly, Charmaine reached out, snatching the sample bottle from Melanie's hand. Her voice was calm, but there was a clear trace of mockery in it. Is this the big brand you think it is? How unfortunate, its value doesn't even measure up to a fraction of what I use. You probably don't know, but everything that touches my skin is handpicked by Ezra. He even has specialists customize them for me because I've always pursued something unique. From the looks of it, he doesn't seem to put as much effort into you. The mockery in Charmaine's voice made Melanie's face twist in anger. Charmaine's eyes stayed cold as she continued, Yes, I've known about you for a long time. But guess what? I never came looking for you because you're not even worthy of being my rival. You only live for the approval of men and measure your worth by their attention. Someone like you would never be a challenge for me. If you hadn't insisted on constantly showing up in front of me, I wouldn't have bothered to speak to you at all. You think that man's everything you've ever wanted, huh? Well, you can have him. With that, Charmaine stood up, preparing to leave. But before she could, Melanie suddenly grabbed her arm and flashed an unsettling smile. Charmaine, don't think I don't see through you. You act so calm, but deep down, you're more frustrated than anyone. He may not treat me well, but at least he cares about me. Let's see who he cares about more. Before Charmaine could react, Melanie screamed and jumped down the slope where they were standing. As Melanie leapt, she still held on to Charmaine's arm, nearly dragging her down with her. Charmaine barely managed to steady herself, but she twisted her ankle. The sudden commotion drew everyone's attention. Ezra was the first to rush to Charmaine's side, grabbing her to steady her, his eyes red with worry. Charmaine, what happened? Charmaine shook her head, about to speak, when someone suddenly yelled, Melanie fell. At that, Ezra immediately released Charmaine's hand, abandoning her without hesitation. He rushed to find Melanie, not caring that Charmaine lost her balance and fell again. The sharp pain in her tailbone made her head spin. Charmaine watched, heart sinking, as Ezra ignored everything to search for Melanie, her blood turning to ice. The rest of the group exchanged glances, trying to shield Charmaine from the scene. As she watched the chaos unfold, the words Melanie had spoken echoed in her mind. It all seemed pointless to Charmaine. She gently pushed away the hands of the students who came to help, her voice hoarse as she said, Tell Ezra I've got things to do and I'm leaving. Ignoring their attempts to keep her there, Charmaine limped away. When she reached the side of the road, in a place where no one could see, she couldn't hold back the tears. She fought to hold back the sobs, telling herself that it wasn't worth crying over a man like him. Soon, a taxi pulled up to the curb. Charmaine got in, and the driver asked for her destination. Her gaze remained blank as she stared out the window, her voice barely audible. Please take me to the airport.